Alright everyone, there's a very, very funny article archived, link in the description. New York Times decided to do its yearly presidential rankings. Now, I've always had a problem with all of these ranking lists that these so-called political scientists put out, and I'm not exactly sure which people they were polling and surveying on this one, but it's an absolute travesty in so many ways. Before people think, well, you know, you're gonna complain because Trump is dead last in it. Yeah, well, that definitely shows some bias. It shows somebody's a little bit cuckoo. But that's not even the most major problem with this list. It's just so funny when I'm going through. But I've actually got it open. One of those rare times when I'm going to have something that I'm actually sort of like reading over while I'm making a video. Normally it's totally unscripted, but with this it's like, you know, I get a bunch of presidents. I got to show you why it's funny particularly. My first thought, of course, and this is common, I realize that I'm in the minority on this one, is FDR being anywhere in the top 10. FDR, who violated the Constitution to throw several 100,000 U.S. citizens in concentration camps. FDR, who allowed a bunch of materials to be sold to Nazi Germany when we were already in a war. The FDR who coddled the Russians, thus leading to the prelude to the Cold War situation that existed later, thinking that we needed to prop up a group that later became our most desperate enemy in the world. FDR, who created the modern military-industrial constant war footing by lasting so long in the presidency that people got used to the concept, oh yeah, the United States has to have like 2-3 times the actual effective tax rate we used to have in order to pay for this massive military expenditure. So, you know, cry me a river, but I don't think FDR should be in the top 10. He was an okay president in many counts, but I mean, economically, there are a lot of people who say, well, he probably prolonged the Depression for half a decade. Other than having been president during the Second World War, therefore it's like, oh, you know, America, hurrah, greatest generation stuff. There's really no reason to rank him strongly. There's really no reason for it. That and some infrastructural programs, like some of the river projects and dams that they built, that I mean, any president could have done that. So that's number one. Number two, Truman being in the top 10. Truman, single-term disaster, didn't work well with others. Diplomatically okay, I guess. Ushering in, of course, that happy era by dropping a bomb on Hiroshima. That was a fun time immolating all those civilians. Wonderful move. And then, you know, even though the fact that Japan was totally paralyzed, oh, we're going to drop another one. And you know why it was. It wasn't, oh, well, we got to be sure that they surrender. That was the cover story. The real story is that they wanted to test a second bomb design and see which one was better. That's the only reason they bombed Nagasaki. So I don't think that somebody who, you know, did such a thing, who was really a desperate, bitter individual, by all counts, didn't get reelected because he sucked. I don't think that Harry Truman should be in the top 10. I'm sorry, but I just don't think so. Obama being in the top 10, above Ronald Reagan, actually. That's a very funny one. You see, the thing is, he was rated at number 18 last time they had this, which would be, you know, more fitting, although I would put him a lot lower than that myself, like down near George W., because he's basically George W. with a D after his name. But he was down at a more sane level. Now he somehow is better than Ronald Reagan. Even Reagan being in the top 10 is questionable. He was basically a puppet and a figurehead. LBJ being in the top 10. Oh yeah, that dude who was also totally bigoted and fucked up in Vietnam. You know, ended up not even bother seeking re-election because even he felt guilty about how he had acted. That makes sense. Also, Clinton, get this, is ahead of John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy is only a slot ahead of George Herbert Walker Bush. I don't know what's going on this list. It just doesn't make any sense. And you just go on through. Some of these people like Carter. Carter's always in the lower end of the mid-tier, and he doesn't deserve that. He was a better president. I would put Carter up maybe where George Herbert Walker is. I'd put Kennedy up around, I would replace Kennedy into Obama here. LBJ and Truman shouldn't be in the top 10. FDR shouldn't be in the top 3 at least. That doesn't make any sense. Now, Trump has managed to come in dead last with nobody whatsoever liking him, despite the fact that he's only served for an actual year. Now, can I ask anybody this? What so far has Trump actually demonstrably done that has harmed this country? I don't mean by opinion like, oh, well, Trump is a mean man. Trump has said a bigoted thing according to what the New York Times says. I don't mean that. I mean, has there been any demonstrable harm to the United States outside of the realm of we no longer suck up to Western Europe as much as we used to? and he prefers relations with China, or he prefers relations with some of the Gulf states, and it seems he has much better if it's about foreign policy. So far, he got applauded on Venezuela, although that was kind of a shoo-in. He's contained the DPRK and got China involved. He's the first one to successfully get China truly involved on North Korea. That's a win for him. I'm sorry, that's not a loss. The fact that he's dick-wagging around in North Korea isn't endangering the world. He's gotten China to see things our way in that realm. That's a good thing. His tax proposal, despite being universally condemned by Democrats, ultimately is going to save a lot of people a lot of money and probably cause an economic boom in this country. You can't demerit him for it. You haven't even seen what it's going to do. People just say, well, it's going to increase the deficit. Well, yeah, so did Bush and Obama, so who cares? At this point, anyone claiming they even give a shit about the deficit is probably lying. They only care if the other party happens to be in charge. Otherwise, the deficit's just fine. Don't worry, said the Democrats for 8 years. The deficit's, it's not really that big. Most of the debt's internal. We can pay it off. We never will, but we can. Don't worry about things too much. Trump comes along, the recovery starts going to middle America. I guess some of these political scientists, they just don't want small-town America to recover or something. Maybe they're mad about that. What has he actually done? I don't mean, he said something off the wall. That's Trump's personality. Yeah, you're going to have to get used to his idea of governance. By the way, it was funny to see Andrew Jackson's legacy and Clinton's legacy both fall off a cliff in this list, and think about the reason why. Showing you that it's all situational. It's basically, this is the court of public opinion among, groups that tend to lean a little further left. When they say that they're Republicans, a lot of Republicans don't like Trump because he's not a Republican. No wonder he's low on the fucking list. By the way, George W. is not even in the bottom 10. The list can't possibly be taken seriously. George W. should round out the literal bottom here. Nixon's not on the bottom 10. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, dude? Trump is dead last. He's worse than James Buchanan. Certainly worse than Herbert Walker. I mean, come on. This makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, George Bush is up 5 points in the rankings. Okay, so the fact that he's said, well, I don't like Trump, gives him 5 extra points, I guess. To have Clinton ahead of JFK, I think, is probably the worst insult I've ever seen. To have Truman anywhere near the top 10 is crazy. Now, this presidential ranking list is absolutely insane. On partisan vote lines, Democrats ranked Ronald Reagan 9 places lower than Republicans, while Democrats place Obama 10 places higher. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, Obama's going to be in the top 10 according to Democrats because he's a recent Democratic president. You look at the list, even if you go over to the Republican scholars, Trump is still near dead last. He's at fifth, number 40. Which is pretty fucking funny. I'm not surprised about which president deserves to have his likeness carved next into Mount Rushmore's granite cliff? A lot of people say Franklin Roosevelt. Yeah, I think that would be probably a pretty bad idea. Again, considering the ramifications of how he actually fucked this country over, but that's just my humble opinion. A lot of people think that he's better than that. I would put somebody more deserving on there. Yeah, somebody more. Eisenhower would be probably the best. Honestly, Ike was a sane individual. Did keep up the military-industrial complex, but he was a good president. Him being in number 7, he deserves that. And Teddy Roosevelt and Lincoln and Washington. I'm not as much a Lincoln fan. I think Washington deserves number 1 because he was number 1. But again, that's just me. But having Obama in the top 10, or Reagan, or LBJ, or Truman, doesn't make sense. You could make a better argument for Clinton being in the top 10, honestly, than Obama. To tell the truth, simply for economic reasons. Obama's silent warmongering, how's that really that different from George W., who's way down there? If Trump continues, shouldn't Trump then be in the top 10? Because he's keeping up some of the strikes that we do in like Pakistan and Yemen. Well, supposedly that's a good thing. Deficits are good, and intervened in trade is good, so who cares if he puts a tariff on Asian goods? It wouldn't matter, ultimately. Those should be seen as good things. It's what the government's been doing. Oh, that's right, he's Donald Trump. I think a lot of it boils down to he happens to be in office at the time, like George W. magically recovering. Obama, even Democratic scholars did not rank him that high. They like Clinton better, or someone like that, or an FDR. Now they like Obama a lot more because he's not in office anymore, so he's silent. So see, things start reverting over time. People forget about the shitty stuff you did a little bit, I guess, over time. That's why George W. is not off the list bad. He should have a 0 on this list. Obviously, not quite the case. That's about all.